Welcome. This is the Rip Griffin Show podcast, a baseball podcast for baseball fans of all ages. Now, here's your host, Rip Griffin.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Rip Griffin Show. This is episode 63. So before we get into tonight's episode, I just want to remind everybody to head on over to our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to that. We will be putting out YouTube exclusives. And also, to be sure to rate the show, subscribe to the show. Let us know how we're doing. And with that, I'll go ahead and bring in my co-host, Brad. Brad, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing awesome. How are you doing?
I'm here, man. I'm excited to get on to tonight's episode because we're talking Cubs tonight, as if those that are watching have not seen, because we are donning our Cubs gear. And also, we have our guest tonight from Bleacher Nation, Mr. Bryan Smith, excuse me. How are you doing, Bryan?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about the team to non-Cubs fans, because I feel like Cubs fans feel so much angst right now about the team. But I think, stepping outside of the bubble a little bit will be a healthy thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we'll kind of talk about tonight. We were going over things in our before the show started. We'll kind of talk a little bit about the news and kind of what's going on. And then we'll kind of talk about the Cubs. And, we do have a Twitter poll that we put out. And our player of the week was Chris Bryant. So we'll kind of touch on him, as well as the player you wanted to talk about, Zach Davies, as well. So, but we're going to go ahead and just dive into tonight's episode. We'll kind of talk about the news, but, kind of starting off the show on a somber note is the passing of the great legend Hammerin' Hank Aaron, who had passed away at age 86. It's sad. One of baseball's most iconic legends, one that has he was a pioneer for the game of baseball, and it was truly sad for him to pass. And I'm sure Braves Nation right now is mourning the loss of a legend.
I think that all of MLB's mourning the loss of Hank Aaron. One of the things that I found fascinating about Hank was the news about like how he broke the record for the Babe, and nobody ever mentioned like his total bases, his RBIs, because he holds the records for both of those too.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that statistic about him still having 3,000 hits, if you take away all the home runs, is just such an amazing number, and speaks to how he was such a better baseball player than just, remembering the home run piece of it.
Right. I mean, the guy, he went through so much crap when he was going for that home run, when he was trying to beat the Babe's home run. I was just watching a biography on him, or a documentary on him this over the weekend. And the stuff that he went through was just horrible. And that guy had such strength to go through it. And I mean, I'm glad that he got to embrace the years after his career.
Yeah, it was, I heard something the night before he broke the record, the Babe's record, that, I mean, he was getting, death threats, not only to him, to his family, letters. I mean, imagine, going through that time, and as he's approaching the record, and there's, the off season, and you're getting all this hate mail, and how do you muster everything together to be able to go out and play baseball? I mean, the sheer strength that he had to kind of go through everything, especially during that era in the 1970s, and then ultimately break the record. And I think the two guys that ran out onto the field as he was rounding second and kind of just congratulated him was something you didn't see probably during that time. But they went out and they congratulated him, and I'm pretty sure he probably felt relieved to get that out of the way. But it was the things he went through was very rough.
Yeah, absolutely. Rest in peace to Hammerin' Hank Aaron.
'Yes. So, but kind of moving on, we don't want to seem like we're moving on from Hank Aaron, because I mean it's truly a remarkable story, just his career within itself. But we got some other news to go ahead and touch on. So Brad, we had some stuff going around on your neck of the woods with the Red Sox.
So the Red Sox ended up signing Enrique Hernandez for 2 years, $14 million. They also signed Garrett Richards for 1 year, $10 million. And one of the most shocking things that had happened this offseason with the Red Sox was that the Red Sox had acquired Adam Ottavino from the New York Yankees with AA prospect Frankie Herman. And it was basically for a player to be named later, or cash considerations. I've been pretty upset with what's been going on this offseason because it's been super slow, and it seemed like Chaim Bloom wasn't doing much. Then he signs Hernandez. Hernandez wasn't my first choice. I wanted Colton Wong, but I definitely did. Hernandez was definitely on my list. Definitely happy because of the versatility. He could play any position. Infield, he could play outfield. So I think he's going to platoon with Renfroe, maybe Andrew Benintendi. Garrett Richards, I'm not too familiar with. One of the hosts of the other show that I'm on, he's making us, he's hyping him up for us. I'm expecting good things out of him. Ottavino, that one was extremely weird just because of the fact that it was like completely out of left field, and it was a trade with the Yankees. The Yankees haven't traded anybody with the Red Sox. Have done business with the Red Sox since 2014 with Stephen Drew. I'm excited to see him. And Frankie Herman, from my understanding, he's going to be supposedly a starting pitcher. He's a AA prospect, and he tops out at 98. So I'm excited for those guys.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that I'm jealous as a Cubs fan because I think all three of those guys would have been helpful in Chicago. I think the Cubs had a ton of problems hitting left-handed pitching last year, and Kike would have been a nice fit there. Garrett Richards, big stuff guy with a ton of spin, and the Cubs love big spin pitchers. And Garrett, I think, could be primed for a breakout. And Ottavino, I think, fits in any sort of seventh, eighth inning role, and the Cubs probably lack a good seventh inning guy. So I was jealous. Not only was I just jealous of doing anything, I was jealous of the actual names.
Just gonna throw this out there. Brock Holt's available, so if the Cubs need him, I'm tired of all the Red Sox fans saying we need Brock Holt.
I will take any signing.
It'd probably be really cheap too.
Yeah.
I think the Yankees and the Red Sox trading is probably the most shocking part of all this, because I mean, like you said, it's the first time since 2014 that
the funniest thing about that trade was it was right in the middle of their series, so Stephen Drew literally walked across the field.
It's something you don't see, especially with the offseason, is two rival teams, swapping trades. And I think that was the most shocking thing with all that. But, Red Sox got some pitching, but we'll see what happens, But kind of moving on, actually, we'll stay on the Yankees for just a little bit, because they actually added to their rotation, and they signed Jameson Taeyang from they got it as a trade, from the Pirates for 4 prospects. So this is, Garrett Cole and Taeyang are back together again, from their old days in Pittsburgh. How do you, Bryan, let me ask you this first. How do you feel about this Yankees rotation with the addition of Taeyang?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Yankees probably have some good information on how Taeyang's feeling and where he's at because of how close he and Garrett Cole are. And so I think if the information coming from Garrett is that Jameson's back and ready to be, the guy he was at his peak, then he's got the stuff to be lights out. And I think that could be a real difference maker and a kind of upside guy that you weren't going to find on the market, probably, I don't know, maybe outside of Trevor Bauer, who who is the opposite. Garrett Cole would not want him. So
Right.
I thought it was a nice fit. And from, my perspective, it's just amazing how bad the Pirates are going to be. I mean, they are going to be as bad a team as we've seen in a while, with as low a payroll as we've seen in a while. It's pretty remarkable.
So since you mentioned him, I just want to get your opinion on Trevor Bauer. Do you think he deserves the $30 million a year annual average?
I think that if I was going to sign Trevor, I would really want to understand what happened with his fastball spin rate last year and why that jumped. And if that's something that we believe is sustainable going forward, or is it something that eventually a change in the rules could make him stop reaching those heights? And that would give me a little pause. There's a big difference between a guy who, I think it was, 450 RPMs on his fastball that went up last year, and nobody really knows why. And if that goes away, I'm not sure I'd want to pay him $35 million a year. But, if you're getting the guy he was last year, sure. I mean, he's as smart a guy when it comes to pitching as there is, and the arsenal is fantastic. So, yeah, I would just sort of want to really understand that one answer.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there, or I maybe should call them critics, that think he's worth that $30 to $40 million range. I mean, to me, he's had maybe one, maybe two good seasons. I mean, his career ERA right now is a 3.90.
Yeah.
This last season, yes, his ERA was a 1.7 something, but his record was 5-4. And if he wants Garrett Cole type money,
can't really put the record on there because the record does.
Well, I mean, if we're just, I mean, I know 60 games is not much to scoff at, because, I mean, he only had 11 starts. I mean, if somebody wants to pay him 30 or 40 million, I would like to see him actually go out and, have 25, 30 starts coming into, say we do go in and have 162 games this season. Let's give him 25, 30 starts and let's see how he does on a 1-year deal. And if he's worth it, then let's go ahead and structure a contract. But for somebody just to come in on a 60-game season, he's, to me, I would probably pay him maybe $15 million for 1 year. That way, let's see what happens. Let's see, like you were talking about, Brian, the spin rate. If it's still up after 1 year, then let's go ahead and talk about long term. But to me, he hasn't shown anything that would signify he's worth 30, 35 million, 40, whatever it is. But I mean, that's just me though.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat there. The whole spin rate and everything that's going on right now with like the doctoring the ball or whatever it is. So, I mean, Garrett Cole has to answer to the whole whatever was going on with him cheating. So I don't know. I was pretty high on Trevor Bauer at first, and then like after looking at his stats and whatnot, and the fact that he's kind of a troll.
Very much so.
This whole offseason, like at first I was like, yeah, dude, momentum, yes. Rachel Luba, yes. This whole thing. And then it got old maybe about 2 weeks later. But I will say this. I did read a thing on, I think it was the Bleacher Report. He said that he made a bet with one of his friends that if he ended up signing a multi-year deal, he would let his friend shoot him in the groin with a paintball gun. So I want to see him sign that at least a two-year deal because damn well he's got to do it on momentum to promote it himself. So I want to see that.
I think the really interesting idea that he's talked about is that he thinks he could pitch every fourth day.
Yep.
And so, if you were a team that really believed he could do that, I mean, that would really turn baseball on its head if we had a guy who was actually going to make 40 starts in a season again. I don't really buy it. I don't see how you would spend $30 million a year on a guy and then increase his injury risk like that. But if we were in a world where that could happen, that would be really interesting.
I feel like if he did pitch every 4 days and his team ended up in the postseason, he would be worthless then.
Sure.
Yes. So, but there was some movements in Philadelphia. Brad, what happened there?
This was actually kind of funny to me, seeing as the Phillies ended up crying poverty, saying that they lost $2 billion when their team's only worth like $2.4 billion. JT Realmuto signs a 5-year, $115.5 million contract with the Philadelphia Phillies, making him the highest annual average value for a catcher at $23.1 million. I believe the previous highest annual average value was Mauer at $23 million a year. And I'm happy for Harper because he's been a proponent on, having the Phillies sign JT Realmuto, but it would piss me off if I was a Phillies fan because of the fact that they were crying poverty after the end of last season.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really leave them a whole lot of room to go out and get other needs that they need to address. I think they've been talking about maybe possibly trying to re-sign, Didi Gregorius.
He's looking at trying to get $15 million a year.
So, I mean, the Phillies really shot themselves in the foot with this signing. I mean, that's no disrespect on Realmuto and his talent because he is a talented catcher. But if the Phillies say that they don't have the money, then all of a sudden they go out and they spend this money, plus you're also paying Bryce Harper $300 some odd million for the next 8 years?
I think it's 9.
9?
Something like that.
I mean,
could be 10. I think he signed a 12-year deal.
I think so. Yeah, because Machado got like an extra year or something. Or it was like, I'm not going to go into that part. But I don't know, Brian, what do you think about the Phillies signing Realmuto?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that he's probably baseball's best catcher. And, I think you sign a catcher that late into his 30s, maybe that 5th year is going to hurt a little bit. But I think he's got a good chance to provide the value in the first 3 years that the 4th and 5th, they hurt a little less because hopefully he did some good things for you. The problem is that what you guys said. I mean, are they going to have any room to sign pitchers? And they got a lot of work to do, especially, their bullpen, I know, was a huge problem for them last year. And they're in a big boy division. And so being able to tread water in that division is tough sledding. And so, I give them credit for ponying up and keeping a really good player because I don't know that they would have had access to someone of his caliber, but there's some work to do still for them to be a playoff team.
Feels like that was definitely a Dombrowski move. He's like, you guys need to sign this guy for this amount of money.
Yeah. He likes the big guys, which I can appreciate.
Yeah, he'll probably end up trading some of the prospects for pitching.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that came out this week was the Hall of Fame, and the ballots were released. And nobody's going into Hall of Fame in 2021.
That's a lie.
Well, Derek Jeter, I mean, they are, going to have a ceremony I'm talking about for the 2021 class. So, but 2020 class is going to be honored this year because of the whole pandemic thing. But nobody was elected into the 2021 Hall of Fame. There,
all right.
Yeah, you just got to bust my balls again. But anyways, one of the most things that's trending right now is Kirk Schilling, and since he was didn't quite make that 75% that was needed to qualify him for the Hall of Fame. He's gone out on record saying that he wants his name taken off the ballot for next year. Doesn't want any part of it. If he is on the ballot, he's not going to participate. If he's elected, I know, Bryan, you're a writer. What is your perspective on the ballots not being cast, and also too, we're not having anybody being elected this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really bad look for baseball is that nobody made it across, especially on a ballot where, I think that I'm a smaller hall guy, so I don't know that I would have filled out a ballot 10 names deep, but I can understand the argument for probably 11 players on that ballot. I think that's too bad. I think the Hall of Fame's really in danger of losing relevance to a pretty growing generation of baseball fans. And I know, just speaking for me personally, it doesn't resonate a whole bunch with me. And, I don't put as much stock into feeling upset about it or disappointed by the results, because I found it to be a pretty sanctimonious process for a good 10 years now. So the ballot for me, I mean, the way that I feel about it personally, I guess, is that if Barry Bonds isn't making the Hall of Fame, I don't really know what we're doing here. But I understand that, I understand the people that feel differently, but that's sort of where I come from.
I'm definitely with you. Bonds should definitely be in the Hall of Fame. I understand. I don't really understand why he's not. I understand why people aren't putting him in, though.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. But I'm all for the steroid guys. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, nah, anybody who's taken steroids or was like even caught doing it or suspected of doing it should be in the Hall of Fame. If it wasn't for the guys during the steroid era, hitting those bombs, McGwire, Sosa, those guys hitting those bombs in the late 90s, who knows where baseball would be right now? Right. They were the reason people were watching. Yeah. Like McGwire hitting, 70-something home runs. I mean, watching Barry Bonds hit all those home runs. The other thing that I find hilarious is that during the steroid era, they didn't have a drug test. And then once they implemented the drug test, I believe it was in 2003, Barry Bonds never failed one. So it's like, what are we doing? You got Roger Clemens.
Museum, right? I mean, a museum's there to tell a story, and I don't think you can tell the story of baseball without guys like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, whether we like them or not. And
the other thing is like, if we're going to look at it that way, Pete Rose needs to be in there. Exactly. I think 100% Pete Rose needs to be in there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: with the comments that Schilling has come out and said, do you think that come next year, should he actually even be, voted in? I mean, let's say, like for me,
he's going to be voted in out of spite now.
I mean, like
that's what's going to happen.
I mean, I would think personally, if I was a writer, and he said the comments that he said about me and my colleagues, I don't see him actually getting any votes. They can leave him on the ballot all he wants, but I mean, he's such a controversial political person. I mean, now granted, the Hall of Fame should be about, what was done on the field. Now, I mean, your political views and whatnot, that's yours. But, what he's done on the field, I mean, maybe it might give him consideration. But I think with the comments that he said, I don't see him actually getting any votes next year.
I think that, I think it felt a little bit like you can't fire me, I quit. I think he read the room a little bit and realized that, he probably wasn't going to make it and thought that was maybe saving face a little bit. And I think we're maybe all a little smarter than that, but I don't feel that strongly either way. I guess, if I'm talking about it just in a museum sense, I guess in my mind, have the sock there, have something there to tell the story of that game. And if that's all the Curt Schilling there is in the museum, that's fine with me.
I've been to the Hall of Fame a couple times, and the sock was there the first time I went. It wasn't there the last time I went. I went earlier this year. And one thing that kind of shocked me was that he said that if he did get elected into the Hall of Fame, he was going in as a Diamondback and not a Red Sox. And I had to do a little bit of research on why he wouldn't want to go in as a Red Sox. He said that it was something to do with how he'll never forgive Henry and Tom Warner for how they treated him. And I was like, well, what do you mean how they treated you? You won 2 World Series with the Red Sox. And I guess he's never been invited back to celebrate 04 or 07. Mm-hmm. So
we have that going on with Sammy Sosa in Chicago. We're waiting anxiously for the ownership to invite him back, and it has yet to happen.
Wow. But the Hall of Fame is, I think that's one of the things that as a player that you strive to get to that point. You've worked so hard in your career, and you want to be enshrined amongst the best. Like a Henry Aaron. I don't know. We'll see how this continues to unfold, because it's an ongoing story right now. It's trending on all over social media. But I'm not a writer, so I don't know. But I think that he should just not get any more votes, and and that's it. But I'll kind of move on here. The Blue Jays signed Marcus Semien for a 1-year, $18 million deal as they continue to kind of bolster that lineup, especially with the addition of George Springer. This seems a little bit high as far as the money is concerned. What do you think, Brian? Do you think the Blue Jays might have overpaid for Marcus Semien?
I think you're paying a little more just because it's a 1-year deal. So you're paying for sort of the cost certainty of not being in trouble in future years. And he's been worth that number before. He's kind of been all over the place. But if you get the guy he was it 2019 or 2018? I guess that was his career year. 2019, I think.
Yeah.
You get that guy, he's worth $18 million. If you get maybe the 2020 version, he's not. But then you're just out one season. So I like it for them. I mean, kind of like we talked about with the Phillies, they got a ways to go when it comes to pitching as well. So still work to be done, but they do seem like one of the only teams that's ready to spend some money. So maybe they do have enough room to get that where it needs to go.
At first glance, I thought that it was a little much. Then I thought maybe it has to do with the or the Canadian taxes. Then you look at it, they're probably not playing in Canada, so they're probably not going to get taxed in Canada. I mean, they're probably going to be playing in Buffalo. The one thing that I'm kind of curious on is what position they're going to have him play. Because I know pretty much every other team that has looked at Semien has been basically going, hey, we want you to move over to second base. I know the Red Sox were looking at him, and there was a few other teams looking at him, and they wanted him to go over to second.
That's interesting because you've got Vlad Jr. He'll probably be playing third.
Oh, yes. Have you seen him?
He trimmed down.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He trimmed down. So he looks like he's ready to come in 2021 and just rake the East. But let's see. Yeah, because you'll have Vlad Jr. at third. You'll have Bichette, at short. But see, then you got Kevin Biggio. Where's Kevin Biggio going to play?
Is he going to play first?
I thought that Guerrero was moving to first. I could be wrong to that, but I thought that was the case.
My understanding is that Guerrero wanted to stay at third, and who is their manager? Montoya. I know they were talking about keeping him at third. I don't know. I know Shaw was their third baseman last year. I might be wrong, but I know Guerrero is it trend down specifically so that he could be the third baseman.
Right.
I wonder if that's going to do anything with his power, though. So he lost a lot of weight.
I don't think so. I think he still has. I mean, look at his dad, Vlad Senior. He was, tall and lanky and thin, and he still was able to have that power. So
he'd also golf a ball in the dirt all the way out of the stadium.
But I don't know. I don't know where Simeon's going to play. I mean, he doesn't really fit the bill as a designated hitter. I don't know. Maybe this is just one of those things that maybe it was just kind of just a pull the trigger signing. I don't know, but it doesn't make sense, especially when you've got Kevin Biggio over there at second, and you've got Bo Bichette at shortstop. Two of the young phenoms in baseball right now that are up and coming and are cheap because they're still under their rookie deals. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense in my opinion. But
we'll find out.
Yep, we'll find out.
Season's going to start soon. So the next thing we're going to talk about someone that you and I are familiar with, Brian. John Lester.
Yeah.
John Lester signs with the Nationals for 1 year, $5 million. So I'm going to start off by saying I think what the Red Sox did to him in 2014 was complete garbage. They offered him a garbage contract as an extension, and then they traded him off to Oakland. And then after Oakland, it became a tussle between like the Red Sox and Chicago. And I don't blame Lester for going to Chicago because he got Theo. Theo was there, and Theo was the guy that was working with him over in Boston. He knew him. So, what are your thoughts on Lester signing with the Nats? You guys didn't even pick. Well, he had an option, right?
He had an option. It was an expensive one. I think it would have been maybe $15 million more on top of his buyout to sign him. But it did sound like he went to the Cubs with the Nationals offer and gave them a chance to match it, and they declined to do it. And so it's a really hard one to swallow, especially while the Cubs don't even currently have a fifth starter. John, to say that John's beloved in Chicago is an understatement. I think he's, considered by a lot of people to be one of the two or three, if not the best free agent signing the organization's ever had. And of course, everything he did in the World Series to bring it here. So it's going to be hard it's hard to swallow the fact that they wouldn't pay $5 million to keep him in the jersey. At the same time, do I think that John Lester in 2021 is a pitcher that's sort of profiling to have a ton of success? Probably not. I mean, he's at the tail end here. I think everybody's sort of aware of that, and I do think that if Jed Hoyer was given a little truth serum, that he would probably say he liked the idea of giving someone with a little more upside a chance.
Yeah, he just turned 37 as well, so he's definitely on the back end of his career.
Yeah.
But that's kind of do it for the news. Now, you guys want to kind of jump into some Cubs talk?
If I say no, will you still do it?
Yes.
Okay.
So what we've got kind of planned here is, we'll kind of talk about the team and everything. So one of the things that we kind of wanted to start off with was we're going to jump back a few years, maybe a decade or so. And we're talking
2003.
2003. We're going to talk about the Steve Bartman incident.
Oh no!
In all honesty, I just put that in the notes. I was like, I completely forgot about Bartman.
So where were you during this incident, and what are your thoughts on it? About how everything kind of transpired.
Yeah, I mean, I was in high school. I was a junior. No, I was a senior in high school when that happened, and I had gone to some games in the divisional series at Wrigley, but had not gone to any in the NLCS, and so I was at home watching. I mean, I guess my memory and thought about that play is that we spent so much time talking about that we didn't talk about Alex Gonzalez's error, which was probably a bigger play, and we didn't talk about the fact that the Cubs let Mike Mordecai hit a double, and I think because Mark Pryor was really tired, and that was a team effort collapse and not just a fan in the stands. So I never had the ill will towards Steve that a lot of other people did, and I was, that's a nice thing about winning a World Series 13 years later is you can kind of let bygones be bygones with that one.
Yeah, I feel like Steve Bartman got the same type of treatment as Bill Buckner did with the Red Sox.
Right.
He was blamed for them losing, granted it wasn't the World Series, but, Buckner was blamed for years. And I mean, let's not forget what happened the game after, it's a whole team thing. The coolest thing that I about the Steve Bartman thing was the fact that after the Cubs won in 2016, they invited him back, and I believe it was 2017, and gave him an actual World Series ring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't think he came back. I think they invited him. He declined to come, but he still got the ring.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I knew he got the ring.
Yeah.
And didn't he write a letter or something?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it seems like, at least in the circles that I run in, there's not much animosity left, which I think is healthy for everyone involved.
Well, I can't imagine having to go through that incident and then, the years after, the aftermath, because that was going to be my follow-up question is, have you seen him, or has he been around, Wrigley since then? But, you kind of just touched on that. So I kind of answered that question, but, what was the atmosphere like after that? Was it just pure hatred? And, I mean, I'm sure he got, I think he kind of had, death threats and things like that he received as well. So, but,
yeah, I believe, I mean, if I'm remembering right, I believe he, in the short term, changed his name. I think he might have changed it back. And then I know he left town, and I believe moved out west, maybe California or Arizona or something. And so it was, it was a very charged atmosphere, and I think a scary time for him and his family. So it's, it's just one of those things that's silly what sports can make people do. I mean, we were talking about it with Hank Aaron, just, and everything he went through. It's too bad that it can get that emotional for people to become something life-threatening. It's hard to even understand, but I'm very thankful just for his sake that he doesn't have to have that monkey on his back as much anymore.
So a question for you. Do you know the aisle, row, and seat where Steve Bartman was sitting?
I did. Yeah, I believe the seat is no longer there. I think they ripped out that. They sort of changed that section. That section now is they made it kind of a club that near the all you can drink, one of those things. And so they changed the configuration a little bit over there, and I believe it's not there anymore.
Okay. It's the information that I have. It was aisle 4, row 8, seat 113.
Yeah, sure. That sounds right. Yeah, it was I was in the divisional series. I saw the famous Pryor-Maddox game, the 1-0 game that sort of Mark Pryor, I don't know, became sort of the alpha in the league, and before his fall from grace. And I was seated probably about 7 rows back from where Bartman was. So I can definitely, picture it very well.
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's just crazy. And that was during the NLCS too, wasn't it, against the Marlins? Because I think the Cubs were up in that series, weren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I think that game too would have sent them into the World Series, but
yeah,
geez. But let's kind of jump into. I think we lost Brad here for a second. I'm not sure where he went, but let's jump into the championship year, 2016.
Yeah.
Do you think it was worth going after Gleyber Torres to get the Cubs? Excuse me, trading away Gleyber Torres to get Aroldis Chapman, basically on a rental. Considering what we've seen now from Torres, he's become such a dynamic figure with the Yankees. Do you think it was worth the risk for the Cubs to send him away to get Chapman?
I'm certainly glad that it worked out like it did, so that you can just point to the flags fly forever thing. But if Chapman closes out Game 7 and that game is a little less dramatic, I think there's no question that it was worth it. And he was very impactful in each round of those playoffs. And really that was the weakness of the Cubs team that we all knew in July. And to Theo's credit, he just went out and got the best guy available to fill that closer role. And I think Torres is a fantastic player and would have been a nice fit here. But you had Ben Zobrist. You felt like you had second base sort of filled for a couple of years. I definitely understood why they did it. And man, thank God I can tell you as a Cub fan, all you think about these days is just, man, thank God we pulled it out, because if a lot of things happening right now and sort of the angst of this team starting to fall apart would just be so much worse if that game was lost. So that includes the Chapman trade. I don't even think about Gleyber Torres much as a Cub anymore, just because we got the ring.
Yeah, that's all that really matters, is getting that, getting the ring. And Madden basically worked Chapman like a horse.
Yeah. They did. Yeah, that was a very sort of oddly managed game, because Kyle Hendricks was pitching so well, and he had a really quick trigger on Hendricks to get to Lester. And he had said before the day, I don't want to bring Lester in the middle of an inning. I want to bring him in fresh to start an inning, and then changed midway. I think panicked with Jason Kipnis up at the plate and wanted to go lefty. And that sort of set off a series of events where I think the timing of the game was a little off, and he had to go to Chapman a little early, and then we had the Rajai Davis thing, and what a crazy game! One of the best, I think, in baseball history.
Yeah. So the Cubs gave up to get that World Series. Pitcher Adam Warren, prospects Gleyber Torres, Billy McKinney, and Rashad Crawford. Mm-hmm. Torres, like we talked about, he was one of the top ranked prospects within the Cubs organization at the time. So the Cubs gave up a lot, but the outcome was beneficial, as they did win that 2016 World Series.
Yeah, I think the trade that haunts us a lot more is the Jose Quintana trade the next year, when trading away Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease for Quintana. Then you don't get the ring, and you lose two guys who are gonna help the White Sox to really high heights. I can tell you, I think a lot more about that trade and regret sort of that happening a lot more than I do the Chapman one.
Right. So 2016 has come. The Cubs have won a World Series. And now we jump into the offseason in 2020, and Theo Epstein has stepped away. So how do you think the Cubs will fare with Theo Epstein no longer within the organization as they move forward with Jed Hoyer?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is that there is a lot of continuity still involved because Theo and Jed have such a close relationship that I think you do feel like there's a lot of symmetry in how they're going to move going forward with how they would have if Theo had stuck around. But I think even this offseason, Theo's just a better communicator. He's somebody who can, I think, speak to fans and players in a cleaner way than sort of Jed naturally does. And this offseason, the problem has just, to me, has been communication. I think if the Cubs came out and told their fans, we're going to
blow it up.
Yeah, we're not quite where we want to be, where we don't think that we can do anything to make ourselves the best or second best team in the National League, so we got to make some changes. I think fans would have understood, but we got this sort of, we're going to have one eye on the present, one eye on the future line, and then all we've seen is that there doesn't seem to be any eyes on the present. So it's been a frustrating offseason because it doesn't really feel like I guess we're getting the full truth, but I don't really blame Jed for that as much as, I think ownership has really handcuffed him, and that's too bad. But that's also, I also believe that's just the reality of having a expensive team during a pandemic. I don't think it has to be brought down to a payroll as low as the Cubs are looking at, but I can understand a little bit that payroll had to be cut.
Right. It's just interesting, everything that's kind of transpired this offseason, especially, with, John Lester, like we just touched on. What kind of message does the Cubs send by, when they did not engage in talks with John Lester? What was, as a fan, what are you hearing as far as the state of the organization and where it's heading?
Yeah, I mean, I think it signals that there's not going to be a ton of nostalgia here for the guys that brought them the championship. I think, we'll talk about it when we talk about Chris Bryant. And, they've talked about trading Wilson Contreras and guys that mean a lot to this fan base. I think that Theo, when he walked away, he said that this is an offseason where tough long-term decisions have to be made. And if he's not going to be around for 4 or 5 years, he doesn't want to be the one to make those decisions. And, I think that what Jed has decided is that change is necessary. And that might mean saying goodbye to some guys that eventually will have their jerseys retired. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And it would be easier if I felt like there was a really clear path, but it just feels a little muddled right now. And that's sort of that's been the frustration, I think.
Yeah. Last year, the Red Sox felt that. We had to trade away a once-in-a-lifetime generational player in Mookie Betts.
Yeah.
It seems like the Cubs are kind of going in the same direction. Basically, like I said earlier, blowing it up. They non-tendered Kyle Schwarber, who is reunited with John Lester now. And it just seems like a lot of the fans are basically like saying if the Ricketts can't afford it, they should sell.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's pretty close to 30 fan bases that at various times, have very nasty complaints about their owners. When it affects our feel good, they're the easiest ones to blame. But I do think that the idea of taking this payroll down from 210 million to 130 million is just a bridge too far. We can excuse a certain amount as, hey, this team probably did lose some money in 2020, and I can understand you cutting back a little bit, but taking it down to the studs that's a hard sales pitch, and it, like I said, it was never even really sold. It's just sort of happening, and nobody gave us any reason to expect it was going to happen. I didn't know a lot of people that anticipated Yu Darvish was going to get traded 3 months ago.
Yeah, Yu Darvish was traded in. I forgot which catcher it was, but it was his personal catcher now over in San Diego.
Yeah, Victor Caratini.
Right. But the Kyle Schwarber thing. Do you think the Cubs made a mistake, or was it something that had to be done by letting him basically go?
I think that the mistake with Kyle Schwarber was, non-tendering him and getting nothing in return. I think they could have played chicken a little better with the league and tendered him a contract. And then I think that they would have found a home for him. I think somebody would have traded for him later in the offseason when they missed their first target. It would have been $8 million. Maybe you could convince the Cubs to eat $2 million of it, and the Cubs get a prospect back. And I think everybody would be better off. I think they just sort of misread the market. You saw with this Steven Matz trade yesterday. That was a guy that people thought was going to get non-tendered. The Mets didn't. They held on to him. They agreed to pay him. And then later in the offseason, they find a home and they get 3 prospects for it. It did feel like a miscalculation by the Cubs, and that's too bad.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see him no longer in a Cubs uniform, but you're kind of getting the impression of where the organization is going. But we're kind of going to move on to the next segment here, which is our players of the week now. Now, you wanted to talk about Zach Davies, even though he just came over in that trade with the Padres. So what makes Davies such a unique pitcher, and how would he fit into this Cubs rotation?
Yeah, I think that Davies was in the Yu Darvish trade, and I think what's interesting to me about him is that he's sort of the forgotten part of that trade. That when you talk about that trade, so much is talked about the Padres get these 2 guys, including one of the best pitchers in the National League, and the Cubs get these 4 young prospects. And not a lot of people are mentioning, hey, the Cubs also got this guy who was, I had an ERA under 3 last year, and somebody who's really improved in the last couple of years and is a real major league starting pitcher that, if the Cubs are competitive, I think he's helping. And if the Cubs aren't competitive, I bet they trade him at the deadline. And, if he's having a good season, they could get a return that would improve the Yu Darvish trade. And I think it's interesting also that they've acquired a guy that's probably the most similar pitcher to Kyle Hendricks in all of baseball. And so if you're going to get a starting pitcher, it's kind of interesting to me that you would get somebody who's so similar to one of the most unique players, in baseball. So it was a part of that trade I didn't expect, and I find it to be really interesting.
So I have a question for you. We kind of talked a little bit. We talked about it was about Zach Davies, and I was completely shocked that this was your player of the week, your player that you wanted to talk about. I would have figured, a player who's been on the team a little bit longer. Now, do you know his what his repertoire is?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Zach is that Zach last year he had a strikeout rate higher than he's ever had, and part of the reason for that, I think, is that he threw his best pitch, which is a changeup. That's a really good changeup, more than any player in baseball. He threw it, I want to say, without looking, 44% of the time, and no other player in baseball was even close to. I think nobody was above 35%. So he's throwing that pitch, almost constantly off his sinker. And the Cubs are going to have a team next year with 3 guys in their rotation that don't throw it harder than about 88 miles an hour. And I can tell you right now, the Cubs will be last in average starting pitcher velocity. And I wonder if that's maybe even not a mistake. You just wonder, are they seeing something about guys who throw sinkers and changeups that maybe they're a little undervalued compared to, the big fastball, big curveball guys. And, part of it is just these are the guys they have, but I do think part of it is maybe they've identified something, and that's something I'll be watching in 2021.
One of the fascinating things while looking up his stats is that I highly doubt that. I can't believe that this is actually true. It says that last year he didn't throw a fastball.
Yeah, all sinkers and changeups, pretty much.
Wow.
Sinker, yeah. So he threw his sinker 42.2% of the time, and his changeup 41.3% of the time.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's
yeah, he's a weirdo. I mean, I think what we're learning about baseball and the way pitching's going is that I think more people just think, we don't want hitters to see the same stuff all the time. Hitters, they just have that mental bank where if they see the same stuff, they're going to hit it. I think what teams are finding is let's give a bunch of weird looks. That Tampa Bay was a great example in the World Series of, let's just throw a bunch of weird stuff at dudes and that might mess them up over the long run. And I think what the Cubs are saying is, these hitters are going to see 93 with a 85 mile per hour slider from 28 teams in baseball. Let's be the team that throws 86 mile per hour fastballs and 75 mile per hour changeups. It's bizarre, but I guess that's where we're at.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up. That's kind of where we're seeing baseball go. I mean, Zach Greinke throws an eephus pitch at 54 mile an hour curveball. I mean that's we're starting to see more and more of that, and that's just but I mean, hopefully Davies will come in and he can contribute. And it's very interesting that you brought up the point that maybe possibly if the Cubs are in contention and maybe try to go out and get some use them as trade bait and see what you can kind of get, or to kind of bolster the farm system. But it was very interesting for that aspect. And then also too, I mean, Darvish is gone, Lester's gone. It kind of jumps us into our player of the week now, which is, put on by our Twitter poll, which is Chris Bryant. He's such a fan favorite there in Chicago. What about him makes him so popular within the fans and the organization?
Yeah, it's interesting that's the perspective from the outside, because I feel like in Chicago it feels like he's a really divisive player that's never really gotten the love that he's deserved. I think that he was somebody who I remember saying when he was younger, maybe his second year, that sometimes he has a swing that reminds me of Alex Rodriguez, and it's like his treatment by Cubs fans sometimes reminds me of Alex Rodriguez too, where I think there are a lot of people that say, hey, he's not a clutch hitter. He's not the guy I want up in a big spot at the end of a game. And, I think Anthony Rizzo has so much love in the city that Chris was always sort of second or third to the other fan favorites. And it's too bad that if he's played his last game as a Cub, that, I will look back on his career and think it's too bad that he didn't receive more love. And he ended a third base drought in Chicago that had existed since Ron Santo played. We had not had a good third baseman in 40 years. And Chris Bryant comes to the position and gets an MVP. And I think it's funny that you thought that, because and maybe that's what the perception is all around baseball, is that he's beloved here. But in my opinion, I wish he was more beloved, because when he was great, when he was healthy here, he was one of baseball's best players. And I hope he gets back to that in 2021, whether it's with the Cubs or someone else.
So it's funny you said, or with somebody else, because I was about to ask, do you think that's a possibility? So obviously you do. And because you think that's a possibility, where?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is how low Jed Hoyer's been mandated to take payroll. And, when Darvish was traded, my first thought was, okay, that was the $20 million that Jed had to shed. We finally sort of reached the bottom, and the rumors keep coming, and it sounds like maybe the Cubs have to go even lower. And if they do, I think probably the easiest thing to do is, if you trade Chris Bryant, you trade $19 million off your payroll, and you get it to where ownership wants to take it. And it does seem like, he's a guy that they don't have a ton of confidence that they're going to be able to keep. I think they tried, a couple times maybe to have him sign extensions, but he's a Scott Boras client, and Scott Boras clients don't sign extensions before free agency. And so I think out of fear that they're going to lose him, I do think that the most likely thing is that they trade him. I think that now, maybe as we're getting closer to the season, maybe they wait until July and have him try to get some value back. He was not good in 2020. So if he could get some value back and maybe he's not as expensive to another team, maybe you get a better return. But yeah, I'm definitely not optimistic that he's going to be the third baseman this year, and certainly not 2022.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, considering how he was, especially when he broke through, and I almost wonder if, the Cubs holding him back, and then I think they brought him up like 2 or 3 weeks after the season had started in, was it 2015? If maybe that has something to do with it, because of, he's pretty much exceeded his contract, and he's kind of garner a lot of money once he hits free agency. So it kind of makes sense to kind of go ahead and trade him, like you mentioned, in July to try to get something in return versus now, because you may not get anything, because we don't even know when the season is going to start. So,
yeah, Theo, I know one thing that Theo was really proud of is that when this core came up, he had this team that was going to be together for 6 years. And, it was amazing how it all lined up that Chris Bryant, Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo, Kyle Schwarber are all free agents at the same time, after the 2021 season. And so they had this structure where they were going to be this contender for a good 6 years. And it seemed like this great thing. And as time has gone by, it's almost a problem that they're all free agents at the same time, because it's created this stress on this year and the previous year, I think, that might not be there if they were, distributed a little differently.
Well, that kind of wraps up what we have for the show. Brad, you got anything else on Chris Bryant?
Yeah, if my internet would stop screwing up. Not on Chris Bryant. I do have something to ask Brian here. So Theo ended up stepping down. Mm-hmm. And he said he was going to take the year off and whatnot.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the fact that he's working in the commissioner's office?
Yeah, I think the question of what's next for Theo is super fascinating. And if I had it my way, yeah, I love that he's in the commissioner's office, because I would love if he was the next commissioner of baseball. I think
he's not going to say the commissioner's trophy is just a piece of metal either.
Oh. Yeah, I'm as anti Rob Manfred as anyone you're going to find, and so if
three of us here,
if baseball could get Theo Epstein in that role instead of Rob Manfred, then oh my gosh, what a boon it would be for the game to have somebody who, I think actually likes the sport and wants the best thing for it in the long term, where Rob only cares about the best thing for his owners in the short term.
I'm having a child moment here. Let me raise my hand. Hi. So now, a couple more questions before we end the show. What are your thoughts on the 7-inning doubleheaders? What are your thoughts on the fact that the designated hitter is not coming to the National League? And what are your thoughts on the runners starting on second base in extra innings?
Okay, I'll start with the DH. The DH, I'm pro DH for the National League, and let's just make it universal.
It's inevitable.
It makes sense.
Yeah, now it just feels like a bargaining tactic for this season, and it feels like it's inevitable beyond it. So I would do it. The 7-inning doubleheaders, I do not like. That's my least favorite of the three. A 7-inning game just does not feel. It doesn't have any of the rhythms of a baseball game for me, and I don't like it. The 10th inning rule, I have to say, I hated it when it was a concept. And then when it was introduced, I did like it more than I thought I would. I would say that I think the 10th inning is a mistake. I would do it maybe in the 12th.
I agree.
But
if you're going to do it that way. But I forgot what podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about it. It's like, essentially, you can have a person throw a perfect game and lose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a bunt and a sac fly.
Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I think the runner on second, maybe starting in the 12th, would be beneficial.
We've all seen what a 18-inning game that can devastate a team's pitching staff for 2 weeks can do, and those are tough games to sit through, and it's also tough to see what it can do to your team for a couple weeks. And so, if it's a change the players really like, then that's one that I would listen to. And I don't know about all players, but I can say that Ian Happ with the Cubs has talked really positively about it. And so, I'm willing to listen on that one.
Yeah, I found it funny that even though they put the runner on second in the 10th inning, we still had games that were going into the 3rd, 13th, 14th, and 15th innings. I mean, so it really didn't speed up anything.
Yeah.
But,
so we do end every show with a question. And our question that we're going to end this show with is, what is your favorite all-time baseball movie?
My favorite baseball movie is The Sandlot.
Yes.
I was thinking, what, the Rookie of the Year?
Yeah.
That
that hit close to home as a kid growing up in Chicago, but The Sandlot hits any kid close to home. And I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old right now, so we're in prime Sandlot territory. And it might also be the baseball movie I've seen the most recently, and I've probably seen it 4 times since I saw any other baseball movie. But man, it works every time.
Yeah, Sandlot's definitely my favorite. But I mean, you got Moneyball. I love Moneyball. You've got Rookie of the Year. I mean, I'm drawing a blank right now, but
Little Big League. Actually, I did see a movie this weekend, Trouble with the Curve. I don't know if y'all have seen that one or not, but I mean, that was a good one.
Mr. 3000.
I got one for you guys I got a recommendation. Have you guys seen Sugar?
No.
Good. Find Sugar and watch it. It's a story about how difficult it is for players from the Caribbean to go into the minor leagues and transition to life in those small American cities. And it's a fantastic movie. It's actually really well done.
Definitely have to write that down and check that one out.
It's about Miguel Santos.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely have to check that one out. But Brian, that's all we got for you tonight. We appreciate you coming on the show, talking some Cubs baseball with us, talking about the news, and kind of giving us your perspective on how the team's going to fare in 2021.
Yeah, guys, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
We'll have to do this again.
Totally.
Absolutely. Thank you to Brad for everything. Thank you for Brian for coming on the show tonight. That's going to do it for this episode, guys. Be sure to check out the latest episode on all the major podcast platforms, Apple, Google, or Spotify. Check out the YouTube channel for our YouTube exclusives that we're coming out on any news or topics that come out that are available. So that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Thank you very much and take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Rip Griffin Show. Make sure to subscribe to the show on all the major podcast platforms. Follow Rip on Twitter @RipGriffin2.